Have you ever wondered why some minds cannot be shaken? Why certain individuals walk through chaos untouched, while others fracture at the first sign of pressure? And whether that kind of mental invincibility is born or forged in darkness? Listen closely, because what you are about to hear is not comfort, not inspiration, not the soft lie that strength comes from kindness or hope or fairness. This is the sound of doors closing behind you. This is the echo of Florence at night. Stone streets slick with ambition, power traded in whispers and betrayals, alliances rotting the moment they are formed. This is the mind that watches humanity without illusion. This is where mental invincibility is not a gift but a weapon sharpened on disappointment, loss, and ruthless clarity. To become mentally unstoppable, you must first abandon the fantasy that the world is gentle. The fragile mind breaks because it expects mercy. The unstoppable mind survives because it expects resistance. Every human carries within them a hunger for dominance, a fear of insignificance, and a craving to be seen as powerful without paying the price of becoming powerful. I learned early that men do not fall apart because they are weak, but because they lie to themselves about the nature of the game they are playing. They expect loyalty where there is only convenience. They expect fairness where there is only leverage. They expect truth where there is only advantage. Mental strength does not come from positive thinking. It comes from accurate thinking. When you see the world as it is, not as it should be, your mind stops bleeding from every disappointment. The unstoppable mind does not ask why things are unfair. It asks how unfairness can be used. It does not ask why people betray. It asks when they will betray, and how to be standing above the damage when they do. The moment you accept that human nature is not moral but strategic, the noise inside your head begins to quiet. Confusion dissolves, pain becomes information, fear becomes a signal, not a command. You must understand this first truth: the mind collapses when it ties its stability to external approval. The crowd is a drug, and like all drugs, it feels powerful at first and destroys you quietly over time. The applause makes you reckless, the criticism makes you desperate. The unstoppable mind is immune to both. It does not chase validation, because it understands that validation is a leash disguised as affection. The moment you need to be liked, you surrender control over your emotional state to people who do not care about your survival. I watched men with brilliant intellects ruin themselves trying to be loved by those who secretly resented them. I watched leaders weaken because they confused popularity with power. The mind that seeks approval is always negotiable. The mind that needs nothing is terrifyingly free. Freedom of mind begins when you stop explaining yourself. Explanation is submission in refined clothing. When you explain, you invite judgment. When you justify, you concede that others have authority over your choices. The unstoppable mind acts, observes the reaction, and adjusts without apology. It does not argue its worth, it demonstrates it. Silence is not emptiness, it is pressure. It forces others to fill the gap with their assumptions, and most assumptions reveal weakness. The man who speaks less hears more. The woman who withholds reaction gains leverage. Emotional restraint is not repression, it is strategy. Understand how power enters the mind. It enters when you realize that emotions are contagious, and the most dominant presence in any room is the one least affected by the emotional storms of others. Rage is loud because it is weak. Calm is quiet because it is heavy. When chaos erupts, people look instinctively for the still figure, the one not reacting, not panicking, not pleading. They follow that presence without knowing why. Mental invincibility is not aggression, it is gravity. It pulls others into its orbit without effort. But gravity requires mass, and mass is built through controlled exposure to discomfort. The fragile mind avoids pain and becomes brittle. The unstoppable mind seeks measured hardship and becomes dense. Each disappointment you survive without dramatizing. Each insult you absorb without reacting. Each loss you study instead of mourning excessively adds weight to your inner core. Over time, trivial problems stop moving you. The noise of others' opinions fades. You become difficult to provoke, and in a world addicted to reaction, that alone is dominance. Do not mistake this for emotional numbness. The unstoppable mind feels deeply, but chooses carefully what deserves expression. It understands that every emotional display is a negotiation. Show too much anger, and you reveal your trigger points. Show too much enthusiasm, and you reveal your dependencies. Show too much sadness, and you invite manipulation disguised as sympathy. The disciplined mind keeps its inner weather private. This privacy is not loneliness, it is protection. You must also accept that deception is not an anomaly but a default setting of social interaction. People lie to protect their image, to preserve advantage, to avoid discomfort, and sometimes simply because the truth costs more than the lie. The mentally unstoppable do not waste energy being shocked by this. They anticipate it. They listen not to words but to patterns. They measure consistency, not promises. They understand that betrayal rarely announces itself loudly. It arrives dressed as reassurance. When you expect deception, you are not paranoid. You are prepared. Preparation calms the mind. Anxiety is the tax paid by those who refuse to see clearly. The more illusions you carry, the more anxiety you feel when reality approaches. Strip the illusions away, and your mind becomes quiet, even in danger. This is why soldiers, strategists, and rulers often appear calm in moments that would shatter ordinary men. They have already accepted the worst outcome internally. Nothing surprises them. Mental invincibility is built by rehearsing loss until it no longer frightens you. When you are no longer afraid of losing, you are impossible to control. Control is the currency of human interaction. People seek to control others not because they are cruel, but because control reduces uncertainty, and uncertainty terrifies the unprepared mind. When you master your own reactions, you deny others the ability to steer you through fear, guilt, or desire. You become opaque, and opacity creates respect. People are drawn to what they cannot read easily. Transparency feels virtuous, but it makes you predictable, and predictability is vulnerability. Observe how power flows silently. The most influential individuals are rarely the loudest. They are the ones who decide timing. Timing is mental dominance expressed externally. Speak too early, and you reveal need. Act too quickly, and you expose impatience. The unstoppable mind waits. It allows situations to ripen. It understands that patience is not passivity. It is a trap laid with time. Those who cannot wait will always lose to those who can. Waiting requires inner stability. Most people cannot sit with their own thoughts without distraction. They flee into noise, stimulation, and constant expression, because silence forces self-confrontation. The mind that can sit in silence without anxiety has already surpassed the majority. In silence, you notice impulses rise and fall. You see urges lose their authority. You realize that thoughts are not commands. This realization alone dismantles addiction, dependency, and emotional slavery. To become mentally unstoppable, you must stop identifying with every thought that passes through you. The mind produces fear, doubt, anger, and desire automatically, like weather systems. You are not the storm, you are the sky. The average person becomes the storm and wonders why they are exhausted. The strategist observes the storm and decides whether to act under its cover or wait for it to pass. This separation between awareness and impulse is the foundation of psychological dominance. You will notice something unsettling as you develop this discipline. People will accuse you of being cold, distant, arrogant, or unfeeling. This is projection. Your restraint unsettles them because it exposes their lack of it. They need you to react so they can feel normal. When you do not, they feel naked. Do not rush to correct their perception. Misunderstanding is a shield. Being underestimated is an advantage. The mind that needs to be understood is still seeking approval. The mind that is unstoppable does not care how it is labeled, only how it positions itself. Positioning is everything. In every interaction there is an invisible hierarchy forming. It is shaped not by words, but by who reacts, who explains, who waits, who needs, and who can walk away without flinchy. The ability to walk away is the ultimate mental leverage. When you know you can leave, you negotiate from abundance. When you feel trapped, you negotiate from fear. Build a life where walking away is always an option, and your mind will never kneel. This requires ambition disciplined by realism. Ambition without discipline makes you reckless. Discipline without ambition makes you stagnant. The unstoppable mind balances both. It wants deeply but does not cling desperately. It moves forward but does not rush blindly. It understands that power gained too quickly attracts resistance, while power accumulated quietly becomes permanent. You must learn to endure being disliked without becoming defensive. Hatred is often a sign that you are no longer controllable. When you step outside expected behavior, You threaten the unspoken contracts that keep mediocre systems intact. They will attempt to pull you back with shame, ridicule, or moral outrage. These are tools, not truths. The moment you feel emotionally compelled to respond, they regain control. The moment you remain composed, they reveal their impotence. Mental invincibility also demands selective compassion. Care deeply for a few. Be polite to many. Trust almost no one fully. This is not cynicism, it is accuracy. Trust is expensive. Spend it where it yields return, not where it buys comfort. Those who trust indiscriminately are not kind, they are careless with their own future. As you listen, you may feel discomfort rising. That is not because this philosophy is wrong, but because it strips away comforting narratives you have used to protect your ego. It tells you that no one is coming to save you, that fairness is not guaranteed, and that your mind is either a fortress or an open gate. This discomfort is the first sign of transformation. Comfort preserves weakness. Discomfort forges strength. Understand this, Abby. Overall, mental invincibility is not about crushing others constantly. It is about never being crushed internally. It is about choosing when to engage and when to withdraw. It is about being unshakable, not because you are aggressive, but because you are prepared. When you master your inner world, the outer world loses its power to destabilize you. The mind that sees clearly, waits patiently, speaks selectively, and reacts minimally becomes a weapon without ever raising its voice. This is the beginning. The door has opened. The shadows are familiar now. What comes next will demand more discipline, more honesty, and more courage than you have ever been asked to summon, because once you start down this path, there is no return to comforting illusions. There is only clarity, and clarity is a blade. Once clarity cuts through illusion, the mind enters a dangerous phase because what you see cannot be unseen, and what you see begins to isolate you. This is where most people retreat. They feel the chill of separation and mistake it for emptiness. They long to return to the warmth of shared delusions, to the safety of collective denial. But the mentally unstoppable understand that isolation is not abandonment, it is elevation. When you rise above the emotional fog of the crowd, you lose the comfort of belonging, but you gain the vantage point of control. From above, patterns emerge. Motives become visible. The hidden geometry of human behavior reveals itself with brutal elegance. You begin to notice how people move not toward truth, but toward comfort, how they cling to beliefs not because they are accurate, but because they are soothing. You see how outrage is often staged, how morality is weaponized selectively, how principles bend when power is at stake. This awareness is heavy. It weighs on the mind like iron. But weight builds strength. The unstoppable mind does not rush to share its revelations. It learns that insight spoken too freely becomes a liability. People do not thank you for exposing their illusions. They punish you for it. So you learn to observe silently, to catalog human behavior the way a predator studies terrain, not with hatred, but with precision. Mental dominance grows when you stop reacting to the surface of events and start responding to their underlying incentives. Every action has a hidden reward. Every stance has an unspoken payoff. People rarely ask themselves what they truly want. They act out patterns inherited from fear, envy, and desire for status. When you understand incentives, confusion dissolves. Betrayal no longer feels personal. Manipulation no longer feels mysterious. You see that most harm is not born from malice, but from self-interest pursued without self-awareness. This realization hardens the mind without poisoning it. You stop wasting emotional energy on outrage and redirect it toward anticipation. Anticipation is power refined into foresight. The fragile mind reacts after damage is done. The unstoppable mind positions itself before the storm arrives. It reads tone shifts, micro-behaviors, inconsistencies in rhythm. It notices when praise arrives too quickly, when friendliness appears without context, when generosity seeks witnesses. These are not kindnesses, they are signals. And signals are information. The disciplined mind collects information without judgment, without haste, without visible response. It understands that the one who gathers data while revealing none holds asymmetrical advantage. There is a reason silence unsettles people. Silence denies feedback. It refuses to confirm their assumptions. When you withhold reaction, others project their insecurities onto you. They imagine judgment, hostility, or superiority where there may be none. This projection is not your responsibility. In fact, it serves you. It reveals what they fear. People tell you who they are through what they accuse you of. The unstoppable mind listens without defending itself. Defense is an admission that the accusation landed. Indifference starves the attack. At this stage, you must confront a brutal truth. Empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. To feel everything others feel is not compassion. It is weakness disguised as virtue. Those who cannot separate their emotions from the emotions of others become instruments in someone else's strategy. They are easily guilted, easily pressured, easily drained. The mentally unstoppable develop selective empathy. They choose where to invest emotional energy with the same care they would use to invest capital. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Privacy is not cruelty, it is survival. As your inner discipline strengthens, you will notice a shift in how others treat you. Some will become cautious. Some will attempt to provoke you, testing for cracks. Some will grow resentful, sensing that their usual tools no longer work. Do not mistake this resistance for failure. Resistance is proof that you have altered the balance. Systems push back when control slips. Individuals do the same. When manipulation fails, manipulators escalate. This is where the unprepared reveal themselves. They grow louder, more emotional, more erratic. You remain still. Stillness in the face of escalation is psychological dominance in its purest form. You must also learn to weaponize patience against your own impulses. Impulses are the enemy of strategy. The desire to speak, to correct, to prove, to vent, to retaliate feels urgent because the ego craves release. But release is often defeat. The unstoppable mind delays gratification, not because it enjoys deprivation, but because it understands leverage. Time amplifies advantage. A reaction T. Ode may feel satisfying, but a calculated response tomorrow may change the entire dynamic. Those who master timing control outcomes without appearing to try. Notice how often people sabotage themselves by speaking too soon. They reveal intentions before securing position. They expose emotions before establishing safety. They negotiate from need rather than from choice. The disciplined mind lets others reveal themselves first. It asks fewer questions and listens more deeply. It allows silence to stretch uncomfortably, knowing that discomfort makes people talk. In those moments, they give away what they value, what they fear, and where they are weak. Weakness is not a moral failing, it is a strategic reality. Everyone has it. The difference lies in whether you manage yours or allow others to exploit it. The unstoppable mind does not deny weakness. It maps it. It identifies emotional triggers, attachment points, and ego sensitivities within itself and neutralizes them through exposure and restraint. When you know exactly what can hurt you, it loses its power to surprise you. Surprise is the true source of psychological pain. Preparation dulls its edge. As you grow more composed, you may feel a strange loneliness. Not because you are unloved, but because fewer people can meet you where you now stand. Conversations feel shallow. Drama feels exhausting. You see manipulation where others see coincidence. This loneliness is not a flaw, it is the cost of awareness. Most minds seek resonance, not truth. You are no longer tuned to the same frequency. Do not rush to escape this solitude. It is a forge. In it, your mind sheds dependency and learns self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency terrifies those who rely on emotional exchange for power. When you no longer need reassurance, validation, or constant connection, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability disrupts control. People cannot manage what they cannot anticipate. This is why emotionally independent individuals are often labeled cold or arrogant. The label is a defense mechanism. It allows others to dismiss what they cannot influence. Let them. Labels do not alter position. Only behavior does. You must also accept that dominance is often quiet and invisible. The world celebrates loud victories and dramatic confrontations, but real power accumulates silently. It is built through consistency, restraint, and long-term positioning. The unstoppable mind plays a longer game than most. While others chase immediate gratification, it invests in endurance. While others burn bridges in emotional outbursts, it preserves optionality. While others demand recognition, it accumulates leverage. Leverage is born from asymmetry. When you care less, you gain advantage. When you need less, you negotiate from strength. This does not mean becoming indifferent to everything. It means choosing deliberately what deserves attachment. Attachment is not weakness in itself, uncontrolled attachment is. The disciplined mind attaches with awareness and detaches without panic. It understands that loss is inevitable, but despair is optional. There will come moments when you are tempted to abandon this discipline, to explode, to confess, to collapse into the familiar chaos of emotional expression. In those moments, remember that every reaction trains others how to treat you. Every boundary you enforce conditions behavior around you. Consistency creates expectation. Expectation creates respect. Respect, even when unspoken, alters dynamics permanently. The unstoppable mind also learns the value of strategic invisibility. Not every strength must be displayed. Not every capability must be revealed. Mystery preserves advantage. When people know too much about you, they plan around you. When they know little, they hesitate. Hesitation creates space. Space creates opportunity. The mind that resists the urge to be seen gains room to maneuver. As this philosophy integrates deeper, you will feel a subtle shift inside. Emotional spikes flatten. Internal dialogue quiets. Decisions become cleaner. You no longer argue with reality. You accept it, then shape your response. This acceptance is not surrender. It is alignment with truth. Fighting reality wastes energy. Using it multiplies power. You begin to see life less as a series of personal dramas, and more as a field of forces interacting. Status, fear, desire, scarcity, and perception collide constantly. Most people are unconscious participants, pulled by currents they do not understand. You become a conscious navigator. You still feel the currents, but you are no longer dragged by them. You choose when to swim, when to float, and when to let others exhaust themselves against the tide. This is the evolution of mental invincibility. It is not dramatic, it is not loud. It is subtle, internal, and relentless. It transforms how you perceive conflict, ambition, and human connection. You stop asking how to win arguments, and start asking how to avoid unnecessary battles entirely. You stop seeking dominance through force, and start exerting it through presence. Presence is the final refinement of mental power. It is felt, not declared. When you enter a space composed, observant, and unreactive, dynamics shift instinctively. People moderate themselves around you. Conversations slow. Tension recalibrates. This is not mysticism, it is biology and psychology responding to perceived stability. Humans gravitate toward what feels grounded in a volatile world. You are no longer chasing invincibility. You are becoming it, layer by layer, restraint by restraint, silence by silence. And as this transformation continues, you will realize that the greatest threat to your progress is not external opposition, but internal complacency. Power dulls those who stop sharpening it. The mind must remain vigilant, disciplined, and brutally honest with itself. Because what lies ahead demands even greater control, deeper insight, and a willingness to confront the most uncomfortable truths about ambition, loyalty, and the price of dominance. The shadows grow thicker from here, and only those who can master themselves completely will move through them without being consumed. As your mind hardens into this new shape, a more dangerous realization begins to surface, one that most people spend their entire lives running from, because it threatens the comforting fiction that they are fundamentally good, fair, and consistent. You begin to see that morality, as practiced by humans, is rarely a compass and more often a costume. It is worn when convenient, discarded when costly, and weaponized when useful. This does not make people evil, it makes them human. The unstoppable mind does not rage against this truth, it absorbs it. Rage is what happens when expectation collides with reality. Remove the expectation, and the rage has nowhere to live. You start to notice how quickly principles dissolve under pressure. The same individual who preaches loyalty will abandon you when association becomes dangerous. The same one who speaks of honesty will bend the truth to preserve status. The same who condemns manipulation will use it instinctively when they feel powerless. This is not hypocrisy born of malice, it is self-preservation wrapped in narrative. The fragile mind is devastated by this contradiction. The unstoppable mind catalogues it calmly and adjusts its strategy accordingly. This is where emotional detachment becomes not just a defense, but an instrument. Detachment does not mean indifference, it means clarity without distortion. When you are emotionally fused to outcomes. You become blind to leverage. When you are detached, you can see options others miss. You can walk away when staying would cost you more than it gives. You can wait when others panic. You can concede small ground to gain long-term position. Detachment grants flexibility, and flexibility is survival. As this detachment deepens, you begin to understand a darker law of human interaction. People respect boundaries they cannot cross more than emotions they can exploit. The moment someone realizes they can make you feel guilty, angry, anxious, or desperate on command, they gain influence over you. Influence is the seed of control. The unstoppable mind denies access to its emotional control panel. It does not advertise what hurts it. It does not reward provocation with reaction. It does not negotiate with threats disguised as feelings. Threats rarely arrive announced. They come as disappointment, as wounded expressions, as subtle withdrawal of affection, as implied consequences. The undisciplined mind rushes to repair, to soothe, to explain. The disciplined mind pauses. It asks what behavior is being trained. It understands that every time you reward emotional pressure, you teach others to use it again. Boundaries enforced calmly and consistently rewire how people engage with you. Over time, manipulation starves when it no longer produces results. You also begin to see how ambition distorts perception. People rarely see reality as it is. They see it as it serves their advancement. Compliments become tools. Criticism becomes positioning. Advice becomes influence. Even generosity can be strategic, designed to create obligation rather than goodwill. The unstoppable mind accepts gifts cautiously, praise skeptically, and advice selectively. It asks what the giver gains, not out of cynicism but out of precision. Precision is the difference, between strength and brutality. The brute lashes out blindly. The strategist strikes rarely, cleanly, and only when necessary. Most conflicts do not require confrontation, they require patience. Time reveals what force often conceals. Given enough space, people expose their true intentions through inconsistency. Masks slip under sustained observation. The mind that can wait gains truth without conflict. Waiting, however, demands internal fortitude. It demands the ability to sit with unresolved tension without seeking premature closure. Most people crave closure because uncertainty agitates the ego. They want answers, reassurance, resolution. The unstoppable mind tolerates ambiguity. It understands that uncertainty is fertile ground for intelligence gathering. While others rush to settle discomfort, you allow it to linger, extracting insight as it unfolds. This tolerance for uncertainty also reshapes how you experience fear. Fear is no longer an enemy to be eliminated, but a signal to be interpreted. Fear points to stakes. It reveals attachment. It highlights vulnerability. When you examine fear instead of fleeing from it, you uncover what truly matters to you and where you are exposed. The unstoppable mind uses fear diagnostically. It does not obey it, nor does it deny it. It studies it. As you study fear, you realize how often it is manufactured externally. Institutions, leaders, and individuals leverage fear because it compresses decision-making. A frightened mind seeks safety over truth. It trades autonomy for reassurance. This is why fear-based control is so effective. The mentally unstoppable develop resistance to emotional contagion. They slow their reactions when others panic. They verify when others exaggerate. They recognize urgency as a common tactic of manipulation. Urgency pressures you to act before you think. Calm restores choice. Choice is power. Where you slow down, you reclaim authorship over your actions. You become less predictable. Predictability is the enemy of dominance. Those who can anticipate your moves can plan against you. Those who cannot must remain cautious. Caution limits aggression. It creates space. Space is where strategy lives. In that space, you begin to reshape your identity, not around how you feel, but around how you function. The fragile mind defines itself emotionally: happy, angry, anxious, excited. The unstoppable mind defines itself operationally: observant, disciplined, adaptable, patient. Emotions still occur, but they no longer dictate identity. You are not angry, anger is passing through you. You are not afraid, fear is signaling something to be assessed. This shift dissolves much internal suffering. Suffering thrives on identification. When you believe you are your emotions, every spike feels existential. When you see emotions as transient states, intensity loses permanence. This is not detachment from life, it is deeper engagement with reality. You stop dramatizing internal weather and start navigating it. You also begin to understand the strategic value of restraint in expression. Speaking less does not mean thinking less. Often, it means thinking more. Words commit you to positions. Silence keeps options open. The unstoppable mind speaks when speech advances position or clarifies boundaries, not to relieve internal pressure. This selective expression makes words heavier. When you finally speak, people listen because you do not speak habitually. Habitual expression is another form of weakness. It reveals impulse, not intention. The disciplined mind replaces habit with choice. Choice requires awareness. Awareness requires stillness. Stillness, once mastered, becomes intimidating to those who rely on chaos to dominate interactions. In a world addicted to noise, silence feels like authority. As authority gathers around you quietly and without announcement, you must guard against a subtle danger, arrogance disguised as confidence. Arrogance blinds. It convinces you that you have outgrown caution. Confidence remains alert. The unstoppable mind is confident enough to doubt itself. It revisits assumptions. It questions narratives it finds comfortable. It understands that certainty is seductive but often lethal. History is filled with powerful minds undone not by enemies, but by overconfidence. They stopped listening. They dismissed warning signs. They mistook momentum for permanence. The disciplined mind never confuses temporary advantage with invincibility. It treats every position as provisional. It plans for reversal even in moments of triumph. This humility is not weakness, it is insurance. You will notice that as you grow more controlled, others may attempt to draw you into moral debates, emotional arguments, or public displays. These are traps designed to pull you into reactive territory. The unstoppable mind declines battles that offer no strategic gain. It does not need to win every exchange to maintain dominance. In fact, it often benefits from letting others believe they have won. Perceived victory can breed complacency. Complacency reveals openings. There is a quiet cruelty in mastery, but it is cruelty toward illusion, not toward people. You strip away false expectations. You stop promising what you cannot guarantee. You stop offering emotional access you cannot sustain. This honesty, though cold to some, is kinder than false warmth. It prevents entanglements built on misunderstanding. As this philosophy integrates, your relationships change. Fewer, deeper, cleaner. You are less impressed by charm, more attentive to consistency, less moved by words, more guided by behavior. You stop romanticizing potential and start evaluating reality. This protects your mind from unnecessary turmoil. Peace becomes less fragile. Peace, however, does not mean passivity. The unstoppable mind is not tranquil because it avoids conflict, but because it has prepared for it. Preparation removes panic. Panic is what makes people betray themselves. In moments of pressure, the prepared mind remains intact. It may bend, but it does not shatter. You begin to recognize that the greatest manipulations are internal. Your own desires can be used against you if left unexamined. Craving admiration, security, affection, or certainty makes you predictable. The disciplined mind audits its desires regularly. It asks which cravings empower it and which enslave it. It reduces dependency deliberately, knowing that every dependency is a potential point of control. This reduction does not hollow you out, it concentrates you. You become harder to sway, harder to threaten, harder to rush. You move through the world with an inner ballast that keeps you upright when others capsize. People sense this before they can articulate it. They adjust their behavior around you unconsciously. And yet, with all this power consolidating within, you are warned by the shadows themselves. Mastery is never complete. The moment you believe you are mentally unstoppable, you have stopped moving. Stagnation invites decay. The mind must remain sharp, adaptive, and unsentimental about its own limitations. Because the next layer of this path will demand even more than restraint and awareness. It will demand that you confront the uncomfortable mechanics of dominance itself, the ways power is maintained, tested, and reclaimed when challenged. It will force you to look directly at ambition, not as a dream, but as a force that reshapes identity and corrodes those who fail to control it. The terrain ahead is colder, quieter, and less forgiving, and only a mind that has learned to govern itself without illusion will be able to walk it without losing its soul or its edge. At this depth, ambition stops feeling like desire and starts feeling like pressure, a constant gravitational pull that reshapes the inner architecture of the mind. Most people misunderstand ambition because they experience it as fantasy, as daydreams of recognition, wealth, or dominance without cost. But ambition, in its true form, is not a wish, it is a force, and like all forces, it demands structure or it destroys what contains it. The mentally unstoppable learn to discipline ambition before it disciplines them. They do not suppress it, because suppressed ambition leaks out as resentment, bitterness, and self-sabotage. Instead, they channel it with cold precision. You begin to see how unregulated ambition warps perception. It turns every interaction into a test, every delay into an insult, every obstacle into a personal affront. The undisciplined, ambitious mind is perpetually offended, perpetually restless, perpetually dissatisfied. It burns relationships for momentum, credibility for speed, and judgment for ego. The unstoppable mind recognizes this pattern early and refuses to become its victim. It slows ambition down. It stretches it across time. It transforms hunger into endurance. Endurance is the real differentiator. Talent is common. Intelligence is common. Even courage is common. What is rare is sustained psychological endurance under delayed reward. Most people quit not because they fail, but because success does not arrive quickly enough to feed their self-image. They need evidence that they are special. The unstoppable mind does not require constant proof. It is content to remain unacknowledged while it accumulates position. It understands that obscurity is often protection, not punishment. In obscurity, you can experiment without scrutiny, fail without spectacle, and learn without interference. The loud climber attracts resistance long before they have the strength to withstand it. The quiet climber reaches altitude before anyone notices. This is not humility for its own sake, it is strategic invisibility. Power revealed too early invites coalition against it. Power revealed too late is unstoppable. As ambition becomes disciplined, you start to perceive hierarchy not as a moral injustice, but as a natural structure of human organization. Hierarchies exist whether acknowledged or denied. The difference is whether you understand how they operate. The fragile mind resents hierarchy while unconsciously submitting to it. The unstoppable mind studies it and positions itself within it deliberately. It learns that hierarchy is not maintained by force alone, but by perception, consistency, and the ability to impose consequences calmly. Consequences are the silent language of power. Words persuade temporarily. Consequences educate permanently. People adjust behavior not because they are convinced, but because outcomes change. The unstoppable mind does not threaten excessively. It lets patterns speak. When boundaries are crossed, responses are predictable, proportional, and unemotional. This consistency conditions respect. Emotional volatility, by contrast, trains people to gamble. They test limits because reactions are unpredictable. Calm enforcement removes the gamble. You also begin to see how loyalty is misunderstood. Loyalty is rarely about morality. It is about alignment of interest. People are loyal when staying benefits them more than leaving. They are disloyal when that equation reverses. This does not make loyalty meaningless, it makes it conditional. The unstoppable mind does not rely on blind loyalty. It builds systems where alignment is maintained through mutual advantage, shared risk, or controlled dependence. Where loyalty exists without structure, it is fragile. This understanding protects you from naivete. You stop interpreting shifts in allegiance as betrayal of ideals and start seeing them as recalculations. This removes emotional shock and replaces it with strategic recalibration. You adjust positions, you reinforce incentives, you reduce exposure. The mind remains intact because it never confused sentiment with structure. As you operate with this clarity, you may feel an internal tension between control and humanity. This is where many lose themselves. They mistake emotional distance for superiority and begin to see others only as pieces to be moved. This path leads to isolation and eventual collapse. The unstoppable mind avoids this by maintaining internal ethics, not as moral decoration, but as structural integrity. Ethics, when chosen consciously, prevent corrosion from within. They define what you will not do, even when you could. These internal limits preserve self-respect, which is a form of power often underestimated. Without self-respect, dominance becomes hollow. You win externally while eroding internally. The disciplined mind understands that the ability to live with oneself is strategic. Guilt, shame, and internal conflict drain focus. They fracture attention. A clear conscience, even if not a gentle one, preserves mental cohesion. You begin to realize that control is not about domination of others, but about regulation of self under pressure. Anyone can appear powerful when conditions are favorable. True dominance is revealed when conditions turn hostile, when resources shrink, when alliances falter, when narratives turn against you. The unstoppable mind does not collapse under narrative attack because it never outsourced its identity to public perception. Reputation matters, but it is managed, not worshipped. Public opinion is volatile and easily manipulated. Those who anchor their sense of self to it become erratic. They chase approval one moment and lash out the next. The disciplined mind treats reputation as a tool, not a mirror. It shapes perception strategically, knowing that perception influences access, cooperation, and resistance, but it does not internalize praise or condemnation. Internally, it remains anchored to chosen principles and long-term objectives. At this stage, you also become acutely aware of how energy flows through your life. Energy is finite. Attention is scarce. The unstoppable mind guards both fiercely. It avoids unnecessary conflict not out of fear, but out of conservation. It chooses battles that matter and lets trivial provocations die unattended. Many conflicts exist solely to drain you, to pull you into emotional expenditure with no return. Ignoring them is not weakness, it is efficiency. Efficiency sharpens everything. Your speech becomes cleaner, your actions become fewer but more decisive. Your commitments become selective. People begin to experience you as solid, reliable, and difficult to sway. This reliability is intimidating because it removes leverage. When you are consistent, others cannot manipulate you through confusion. When your reactions are measured, others cannot steer you through chaos. You start to notice that true power rarely announces itself. It operates quietly, shaping environments rather than reacting to them. It sets conditions that make certain behaviors costly and others rewarding. It creates paths of least resistance that align with its interests. The unstoppable mind learns to think architecturally. Instead of reacting to individual problems, it redesigns the system that produces them. This systems thinking marks a turning point. U.S. Top personalizing obstacles. You ask what structure created them. You stop blaming individuals and start adjusting incentives. This removes emotional charge and replaces it with strategic calm. Problems become puzzles, not threats. Solutions become structural, not reactive. As this mindset settles, fear loses its grip. Not because danger disappears, but because danger becomes familiar terrain. Familiarity reduces panic. Panic is what collapses judgment. Without panic, you can think under pressure. Thinking under pressure is the rarest and most valuable skill in any hierarchy. You also learn the importance of controlled exposure to adversity. Comfort dulls, adversity sharpens, but uncontrolled adversity breaks. The unstoppable mind chooses its battles deliberately to maintain edge. It trains under stress without courting chaos. It exposes itself to difficulty in doses, building resilience without self-destruction. This deliberate hardening extends to relationships as well. You no longer seek intensity for its own sake. You value stability, clarity, and mutual respect. Drama becomes a signal of misalignment. You disengage earlier, cleaner, without spectacle. This conserves emotional energy and preserves focus. As you move through the world with this refined ambition and disciplined control, you become aware of a subtle shift in how time feels. You are no longer in a hurry, yet you are constantly moving forward. This paradox confuses those around you. They mistake urgency for progress and stillness for stagnation. You understand that true momentum is often invisible. Invisible momentum compounds. While others announce intentions, you execute quietly. While others seek recognition, you secure position. While others react to surface events, you shape underlying conditions. This is not dramatic, it is methodical, it is relentless. And yet, with all this consolidation of strength, you stand at the edge of a deeper danger. The danger is not external opposition, but internal rigidity. Control, if overextended, becomes brittleness. Strategy, if unexamined, becomes dogma. The unstoppable mind must remain adaptable or it becomes predictable. Adaptability requires humility before reality. It requires the willingness to abandon tactics that no longer serve, even if they once brought success. Many fall because they defend their past instead of adjusting to the present. The disciplined mind treats every method as provisional. It evolves continuously. This evolution prepares you for what comes next, where power is no longer merely accumulated or defended, but tested. Tested by rivals who sense your solidity. Tested by crises that expose structural weaknesses. Tested by moments where force must be applied decisively or forfeited entirely. What follows will strip away any remaining sentimentality about control and reveal the final truths about dominance, resistance, and the cost of remaining mentally unstoppable in a world that punishes those who cannot be bent. When power begins to draw attention, the environment changes. Resistance becomes sharper, subtler, more intelligent. You are no longer dealing with random interference but with deliberate pressure, applied not to destroy you outright, but to test where you bend. This is the phase where most disciplined minds fail, not because they are weak, but because they misread the nature of the threat. They expect confrontation. What arrives instead is erosion, small compromises, moral fatigue, strategic distractions disguised as opportunities. The unstoppable mind recognizes this shift immediately. It understands that when force cannot be used openly, it will be applied indirectly. At this level, opposition rarely announces itself as hostility. It comes as invitation, as flattery, as partners, as alignment. The more formidable you become, the less likely enemies are to approach you as enemies. They come as collaborators, seeking access, as advisors offering insight, as supporters offering amplification. The fragile mind mistakes access for validation and opens the gates. The unstoppable mind asks what leverage is being sought. Access is never neutral. To be close is to influence. To influence is to redirect. To redirect is to weaken. You begin to notice how often pressure is applied through obligation rather than threat. Favors accumulate. Expectations form. Reciprocity becomes a quiet chain. The disciplined mind is cautious with indebtedness. It understands that the most effective control is not coercion but consent engineered through obligation. Every favor accepted carries a price that may not be named immediately. The unstoppable mind pays quickly or declines entirely. It does not allow invisible debts to linger. This is also where identity becomes a battleground. Others will attempt to define you publicly in ways that constrain your future options. Labels harden perception. Once labeled, deviation is punished. The unstoppable mind resists fixed identities. It allows ambiguity. It lets others underestimate or misinterpret it, knowing that clarity is power best revealed selectively. To be fully known is to be easily managed. As scrutiny increases, errors become more costly. You can no longer afford impulsive reactions masked as authenticity. Authenticity is often an excuse for lack of discipline. The unstoppable mind chooses coherence over catharsis. It understands that every public action is a signal, and signals shape expectation. Expectation shapes behavior. Behavior shapes outcome. This chain is never broken. At this stage, you also confront the reality that some conflicts cannot be avoided, only delayed. Avoidance preserves energy, but action preserves position. The challenge lies in knowing when restraint becomes weakness. The unstoppable mind does not flinch from confrontation when the cost of inaction exceeds the cost of engagement. But when it acts cleanly. No excess, no emotional leakage, no lingering ambiguity. Ambiguity after confrontation invites retaliation. Decisiveness intimidates because it removes hope of manipulation. People can work around indecision. They can exploit hesitation. They cannot easily penetrate clarity backed by resolve. This is why many fear making irreversible decisions. Irreversibility terrifies the ego because it removes the illusion of endless choice. The unstoppable mind accepts irreversibility as the price of authority. Authority, once asserted, must be maintained. Not through constant enforcement, but through consistency. Inconsistency erodes credibility faster than opposition ever could. The disciplined mind understands that every exception becomes precedent. Every tolerated violation becomes an invitation. Boundaries once drawn must be defended calmly, without escalation or apology. This steadiness creates predictability. Predictability creates stability. Stability creates compliance. You also begin to recognize how narratives are weaponized. Stories are more powerful than facts because they organize emotion. Control the narrative, and you control interpretation. The unstoppable mind does not chase every false story. It chooses which narratives to counter and which to ignore. Silence in the face of accusation can be strength when your position is secure. Engagement can legitimize what would otherwise fade. The decision to respond is always strategic, never reflexive. As you operate under sustained pressure, fatigue becomes the silent enemy. Not physical fatigue, but moral and cognitive fatigue. The constant requirement to remain disciplined, company, unposed, and strategic wears on the mind. This is where shortcuts tempt even the strong. Cynicism whispers that restraint is pointless, that clarity is lonely, that surrendering to impulse would be easier. The unstoppable mind prepares for this phase in advance. It builds rituals of recovery, solitude, and recalibration. It knows that exhaustion breeds error. Error at this level is unforgiving. Small miscalculations cascade. Words spoken in fatigue carry unintended weight. Decisions made under depletion lack foresight. The disciplined mind protects its energy ruthlessly. It schedules disengagement. It retreats strategically. It understands that withdrawal is not defeat but maintenance. Even the sharpest blade dulls without rest. You also become aware that dominance invites imitation. Others will adopt fragments of your behavior without understanding its foundation. They will mimic silence without discipline, confidence without preparation, detachment without clarity. These imitations collapse under stress. When they do, observers often confuse the failure of imitation with the failure of the philosophy itself. The unstoppable mind remains unmoved by this confusion. It does not require validation through imitation. It continues refining itself regardless of how others misapply its principles. At this stage, compassion must be recalibrated again. You will encounter those who break under pressure and seek refuge in you. Some are sincere, others seek to offload responsibility. The disciplined mind helps without absorbing. It supports without entangling. It understands that rescuing others from consequences often teaches dependence, not strength. True aid strengthens autonomy, not attachment. You may feel the temptation to dominate simply because you can. This is the final seduction of power. Dominance for its own sake corrodes judgment. It narrows perspective. It creates unnecessary enemies. The unstoppable mind resists this temptation not out of moral superiority, but out of strategic wisdom. Power conserved is power multiplied. Power squandered on ego display invites coalition against you. Coalitions form quietly. Rarely do people oppose strength alone. They oppose strength they feel threatened by and excluded from. The disciplined mind manages inclusion strategically. It allows others to feel useful without surrendering control. It distributes minor influence to preserve major authority. This balance prevents consolidation of opposition. You also learn that trust, when granted sparingly and tested gradually, can become a force multiplier. Total distrust isolates. Blind trust endangers. The unstoppable mind practices conditional trust. It expands access incrementally, watching how responsibility is handled. It never confuses proximity with loyalty. Loyalty reveals itself under pressure, not comfort. As years of discipline compound, you reach a level where threats rarely feel urgent. You have seen patterns repeat. You recognize cycles. Panic fades. This calm can appear inhuman to those still trapped in emotional volatility. They mistake it for lack of feeling. In reality, it is the result of having already processed loss, betrayal, and failure internally long before they arrived externally. This pre-processing is a hallmark of mental invincibility. You do not wait for events to break you. You imagine them, rehearse them, integrate them, and neutralize their shock. When they finally occur, they feel familiar. Familiarity breeds control. Control breeds composure. Composure under pressure sends a signal more powerful than any declaration. It tells observers that you are prepared for outcomes they fear. It tells rivals that escalation will not rattle you. It tells allies that stability exists in your presence. This signal alters behavior around you without a word spoken. And yet, even now, the greatest danger remains internal. The danger of believing the work is done. The danger of mistaking resilience for invulnerability. The unstoppable mind stays suspicious of its own comfort. Comfort dulls awareness. Awareness preserves edge. You continue to audit yourself. Where have you become rigid? Where has caution turned into avoidance? Where has patience become stagnation? These questions are not asked in moments of crisis, but in moments of calm. Reflection in calm prevents collapse in chaos, because what remains is the final confrontation, not with enemies, not with systems, not with ambition, but with purpose itself. Power without purpose decays. Control without direction becomes emptiness. The mind, no matter how disciplined, seeks meaning or it corrodes from within. The final stage demands that you define what you are willing to endure indefinitely. Not what excites you temporarily, not what flatters you publicly, but what justifies sustained effort under pressure. This clarity anchors everything else. Without it, even the unstoppable eventually drifts. What follows will not offer comfort, it will demand a decision, a commitment, a line drawn not for others, but for yourself. Because the final law of mental invincibility is not about how you dominate the world, but about whether you can stand alone with your choices when the noise fades and only consequence remains. And now you arrive at the final threshold, the place few ever reach, not because it is guarded, but because it is exposed. There is no spectacle here, no applause, no enemy standing in front of you to blame, only a mirror held steady by consequence. This is where mental invincibility is no longer a strategy you practice, but an identity you must accept with all its weight and all its cost. Up to now, everything has been preparation, control of emotion, mastery of restraint, discipline of ambition, understanding of power, hierarchy, pressure, erosion, and resistance. But preparation without commitment is still rehearsal. At this point, the question is no longer whether you understand these laws. It is whether you are willing to live them when they isolate you, when they cost you comfort, when they strip away the last excuses you have used to explain your weakness. Because here is the final truth most will never admit to themselves. People do not fear being powerless as much as they fear being fully responsible. Power removes alibis. Control removes victims. Mental invincibility leaves you with nowhere to hide. When you can no longer blame ignorance, manipulation, circumstance, or fate, only choice remains. And choice is terrifying to those who have built their identity around reaction. This is why so many retreat at the edge of true strength. They flirt with discipline, adopt fragments of stoicism, quote philosophy, posture confidence, but stop short of full ownership. Full ownership means accepting that your mind is either governed by you or rented out to the world at a discount. There is no third state. You are either author or audience to your own life. To become mentally unstoppable is to accept permanent vigilance. Not paranoia, but awareness. Not tension, but readiness. It is to understand that comfort is not the reward for strength, but the enemy of it. The moment you prioritize ease over clarity, your edge begins to dull. The moment you seek peace at any cost, you surrender leverage. True peace is not the absence of pressure, it is the ability to function flawlessly under it. You must now confront the last illusion, that there will come a day when this discipline becomes effortless, when you can relax completely, when the work is finished. That day does not exist, the unstoppable. E-mind is not built once, it is maintained daily. Like power, it decays when neglected. Like dominance, it must be reinforced quietly and consistently. This is where weaker minds romanticize simplicity and mistake regression for enlightenment. They call surrender acceptance, they call avoidance wisdom, they call numbness peace. But you know better now. You have seen how the world operates beneath its moral language and emotional theater. You know that clarity is not gentle, but it is clean. You know that strength is not loud, but it is felt. From this point forward, every interaction tests you. Every compromise trains others how far they can push. Every emotional indulgence sets precedent. This does not mean living rigidly or joylessly. It means living deliberately. Joy chosen freely is strength. Joy used as escape is weakness. You must know the difference. There will be moments when you are misunderstood, when your restraint is interpreted as coldness, when your silence is labeled arrogance, when your refusal to react is framed as cruelty. Let it be so. The need to correct perception is one of the last chains the ego clings to. Perception shifts over time when behavior remains consistent. Explanation is short-term relief. Position is long-term power. There will be moments when loneliness presses in, When you realize that very few can meet you at this level of self-governance, do not mistake rarity for error. High ground is never crowded. The path you are on filters relentlessly. It removes those who seek comfort, validation, and excuses. It leaves only those willing to carry themselves without external permission. And make no mistake, this path is not about domination for sport. It is about sovereignty, about being ungovernable internally, about refusing to let fear, guilt, desire, or approval dictate your actions, about standing in chaos without becoming chaotic, about moving through pressure without being reshaped by it. If you choose this, you must choose it fully. Half-discipline is self-deception. Selective restraint collapses under stress. You cannot be mentally unstoppable only when it is convenient. You must be so when it costs you something, especially when it costs you something. So here is the line you must draw, not publicly, not ceremonially, but internally without negotiation. Decide now that your mind is no longer available for exploitation. Decide that your emotions are signals, not masters. Decide that your attention is precious and will not be squandered on manipulation, noise, or manufactured urgency. Decide that you will observe before reacting, wait before speaking, and think before acting, no matter how strong the impulse to do otherwise. Decide that you will no longer seek refuge in outrage, validation, or fantasy. Decide that you will confront reality as it is, not as it flatters you. Decide that you will pay the price of strength daily rather than the lifelong cost of weakness. Because the world does not need another loud voice, another reactive mind, another person controlled by their last emotion. It needs fewer people who can think clearly when others panic, fewer people who can hold the line when others collapse, fewer people who cannot be bought, rushed, shamed, or provoked into surrendering themselves. This is the final call, and it is not gentle. Either you walk forward from here with discipline as your default and clarity as your weapon, or you step back into the comfort of being managed by forces you pretend not to see. There is no shame in refusing this path, but there is consequence. So choose now. Harden your mind. Strip away illusion. Govern yourself without compromise. Let silence be your shield, patience your trap, clarity your blade, and self-control your throne. And from this moment on, move through the world as someone who cannot be shaken, cannot be owned, and cannot be stopped, because the most dangerous power has always been a mind that belongs only to itself.